Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to Alliance on the Move, our weekly television program here on DTV Channel 8 in Berbice. With me this evening, I have present leader of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Nigel Hughes, and former leader of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Kemraj Ramchitan. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for sitting with me for the next hour or so. This evening, I want us to discuss, with your cooperation in your input, the state of our economy, and then we'll try to put that in the perspective of the 2025 budget and us being a relatively new oil economy. So, gentlemen, I don't know which one of you would want to take the first go, but
Nigel, go
how
ahead.
would you how would you describe the present state of our economy?
First of all, good night, Beverly. Good night, Kemraj, and to everybody in regions 5 and 6. Happy New Year. I think this is the first program that Kemraj and I are on. I think we were in the last program last year. So Happy New Year to everybody. Um, 2025 for everybody is going to be a very important year, least of all because it's the year in which we will have national elections. And it's a year in which we're going to hear a lot of promises across the political spectrum. Everybody's going to try to win your support by offering a lot of, I call them goodies, or some people call them goodies. But we have to remember at the end of the day, that we have an economy which has to be balanced. We have an economy in which we have to increase our exports, our ability to earn US dollars. And we have an economy where people cannot afford to live anymore. The cost of living has become so high. Now, that perhaps is going to be the single most important aspect of, I think, most political discussions this year, because the majority of our citizens are complaining that the cost of living is extremely high. And for people who are on fixed salaries and people who, for example, those who were employed in the sugar industry at the lower end of the employment scale will find it are finding it extremely difficult, and you want to know what is going to be done to reduce the cost of living. And so you will get measures like we've got this 100,000, apart from it being a complete and absolute disaster. Some people have gotten, some people have not gotten. We're hearing all kinds of issues in relation to corruption in the payment of the $100,000 grant, the 100,000 grant. The cost of living continues to go through the roof. And that is going to be the real challenge. How do we as a country bring that down? And at the same time, how do we grow the export economy? We know that sugar last year, I think, had perhaps its most disastrous year. Kamraj can probably tell us exactly how many tons were produced. But at the end of the day, it means that sugar and the people who depend on sugar, the whole communities, there are several communities that depend on sugar, have to find a way in which they can survive. And unfortunately, what has been happening is there has been a lot of subsidies, a lot of payments, and there has been no rationalization of the sugar industry. I think it was the last program we had where Kemrad said, the person who was supposed to turn this industry around completely failed at that and has now been rewarded with an ambassadorial post somewhere in Europe. So we have to have, and I hope tonight we have a serious discussion about what not only happens in the sugar industry, but what happens in the country. And I just want to say finally, we have to be very careful as a country to separate the income we get from oil and the income that we get from non-oil. Because everybody knows that we found oil. We have found huge amounts of oil. And therefore, when we talk about the income from oil, that is not the result of any activity you and I have done or anybody else has done. That has just been literally a gift from God. And so when we look at the economy and we look at how we're performing, we can't look at the amount of money we've made from oil because none of the political parties has created that. The question is, are we using the income from that resource properly, and is the rest of the economy, what we call the non-oil economy, and what we will be referring to tonight as the non-oil economy, has that been performing? And I dare say, I don't believe so, and I don't think the data supports that. That would be my opening statement.
Thank you, Nigel. Kamraj, if we can continue from where Nigel has left off, how would you view the present economy? Nigel touched on the non oil economy and the need for us to see some growth in that area. You've been in parliament and in politics for a few decades. You were there even before Guyana discovered oil. How would you describe the economy, let us say, within the past 2 to 3 years and going forward? What are your expectations there? What are the projections you see?
Well, it is that the expectations, especially from our ordinary people and even the business community, have not been met, notwithstanding almost 4 full years of billions of dollars, US dollars, as an extra revenue stream as against what we used to have prior to 2020. And Beverly, that is of paramount importance, because when we had thought that indeed this oil money is going to make life a little less miserable, it has increased a lot of misery, quite frankly. And one of the thing is, at economics level, the expectations is always going to be high. And of course, when you expect to do or be in a better state and you are not, it aggravates your state of happiness or your desire for happiness and so on. Because quite frankly, as rightly expressed by Nigel, what we have now is that our non-oil sector is not doing well at all. And the spendings of this government have been increased as a result of that oil to the extent whereby the balance is not there. You must have a balance in relation to how much roads and hospitals and this and that you will build as against what will be for social, economic betterment and improvement of the lot of your people. We are such a rich country now, and we project that we're going to be 43% rate of growth, this, that, whatever. And when you go meet people at Albion, when you go meet people at Bath Settlement, when you go meet people at Skeldon, all of them, even the business community, the only individuals who are not complaining are the contractor crony class. But everybody else, they can't fund their children to school, and now school have reopened. They ain't got money for pay the bus fares, some of them, to buy the clothes, to get the meals with them to go to school and so on. And it is an embarrassing situation because within the heart of the PPP support base, we find that the expressions of disgust and resentment are flowing heavily, and they try to cover it up. They don't want their media people to go there and to talk about them. They rather go to Linden. They rather go to the other places. But they must go to Albion. Let the Albion East Indians tell them how they feel about this economy. And we have been seeing reflections of it in even Stabrook News in its cost of living interviews. And we have been seeing it for ourselves when we go meet people there. I went and see my old lady a couple of times at the 47 village. I come downstairs and start chatting and saying how life difficult. Even somehow they're saying that this administration like it affect the fishing industry because when they go out and fish, they're not catching fish and so on. A whole set of things. And so it is really, really bad. And there are bad policies too. I have indicated years ago that we have to change this sugar industry, right size it as we did. They gone now and wrong side the thing by upturning the right sizing. They're spending so much money on sugar. This year they had projected 90,000 tons. Then they retarget after they changed the fellow to Chung from Sis Narayan Singh to Chung, and they said 70,000. They have not even reached half of the 70,000 tons of sugar for this year. And they are in a bad, bad shape, both the first crop and the second crop. And they got to plow in so much billions of US dollars. This year alone, I think is another $9 billion into the sugar industry and so on. So we are misspending money, knowing very well that the next generation don't want to be employed in that job, cut cane, fetch them on your back, and then put them on punt. This fetch, cut and fetch mentality, you ain't gonna get from the people from Albion and Port Morant and Skeldon anymore. This younger generation. And so, in view of that shortage of labor now, you got to start recognizing that we have to move away. Right size, mechanize, this, that. And when you mechanize, you can't get it in bed form like they now have. You have to level the entire land and do certain things that are far more, what you call, accommodating to mechanization. But this government almost, they cuss everybody that are the managers for those factories. They change them around, they transfer them, they discipline them. Some of them walk off and gone to America. Plenty of them gone because they're very competent fella. But they don't want to take instructions, but they must take the instructions. Jagdev said that he's going to see to it that the sugar industry becomes a prosperous thing. Well, we know what happened with Skeldon. Everything that fella touched turned to, well, I don't want to say it, but it is negative. And so to the extent then what it is that the people are suffering from, it's bad policies, bad economics, and it is not going to help. Guyanese, Bobitians especially, as we're talking to them here, they have a tremendously difficult task ahead 2025. And we hope that they're going to recognize that it is not what their expectations were, and they deal with it very rationally at an elections when that time comes.
Beverly, I
Very
wonder if,
important point. Sure, Nigel, go ahead.
so no, I was going to say, especially for the people in Bobis, I really wonder if you know how much money the country is making and how much money you're not seeing. Guyana is making $65 million an hour. That's Guyana dollars, and which works out to be making 1.4, 1.5 billion dollars a day. That's what the country is making from oil, and we have less than 1 million people. And if you ask the average person who is not a contractor, as Kimrad says, how has that impacted your life? And the government will say to you, "Oh, you got roads," but you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. One was the quality of the roads, and we can come back to that. But two, more importantly, are you able to afford to purchase more food? Are you able to put better living conditions for your family? And if you are struggling, where in the future are you likely to get an improvement in your circumstances? Are you going to get an increased salary? What is going to happen in your environment that's going to make it better? So you will hear the government throwing out fantastic figures, GDP. GDP means the entire income of the country divided by the number of people. But that doesn't tell you anything if you are not benefiting from it, if you are not seeing the benefit from this money. And let me just say this money that we make as a country belongs to all of us. PNC, PPP, WPA, AFC, nobody put that there. This is not a result of any policy that any party had. We just got lucky. We were fortunate enough we found oil, and that the company that found the oil is capable of bringing it out of the ground. But if you look at what we, the Guyanese, have done and how we might have improved our exports, we haven't. And all this money that is coming into the country, every day you see they spending $400-500 billion in schools, etc. It's not trickling down. And so that's a very, very important part, I hope, of our conversation during the night. I just wanted to highlight that.
Guys, you mentioned, both of you mentioned, Kamraj clearly mentioned it, and Nigel, you alluded to it. Our policy on spending, because so much of the budget depends and is derived from earnings from the oil industry. That is a finite resource. Are we investing enough in the non-oil sectors so that we have sustainable development? We can look to Trinidad, we can look to Venezuela. Those are very close examples of when the oil runs out, what happens then? And so, my question to you, what policies do you see the present government putting in place or has in place for the sustainable development of Guyana?
I'd like
Well,
my camera to go first this time.
Beverly, yeah, Beverly, this government, apart from its crony capitalistic outreach at this point in time, is very corrupt. You go and you check the corruption index, and you will find that Guyana has one of the lowest in the world. I think it is number 44 out of 176 or whatever. I have always quoted that perception of corruption index in the parliament, and they're very low. Why is that? It is because the present government see in infrastructural works a big bonanza that will come their way. Very senior people inside of that administration have indicated that their lifestyle changes have indeed been shown. They got 6, 7 property. Some got property in New York, all over the place. How in 4 years' time you could get people developing all that wealth? It comes from corruption. And all the economists that I have read, every one of them indicate that it is public infrastructural works where the corruption has a zone that is complete almost. Every aspect of infrastructural work, because even when it comes to the valuation of the project, that can have corruption. When it comes to the actual construction, when it comes to actual design, everything could have humongous. And so you have to at least understand this is where our government is going. And you expect in that budget of 2025, Beverly, that it will be massive spendings again, not on the workers or the working poor or certain biased programs that affirmatively will help poor people in Guyana in social spheres and all of that. You are going to get infrastructural work just like last year, $666 billion. That is almost 55% of our budget. You expect that that is going to happen. Why? Because of the culture. And somehow I get the impression that a lot of them feel that there is a chance that they could lose the elections. So me might as well thief as much as me get now. This is my last chance. Some of them feel that they might not get back there, assuming they win. Jack, they're not going to want them there anymore. So they're going to want to put their hand in the till and take out how much they want via devious methods, by virtue of contractors giving them a portion and this and that and whatever. And that is why. So the actual monies are not going to go where it is supposed to go with a decent moral government. It is going to go to places that is going to fill the pockets and the treasury of certain political parties and their officers.
Beverly, I wonder if we could perhaps demonstrate that in reality. And one of the theories is what's called trickle down. So in other words, the money comes into the economy. Most of that money goes to the government because the oil revenues go to the government. And then the theory is that the money will trickle down throughout the society all the way to those at the lower level. And the practical example is this. The money comes into the government, $6 billion US or whatever the figure is. That money gets paid out by way of contracts to build roads. So let's just take, you give a man of $500 million to build a road between Rosignol and Abari. The contract gets awarded to that contractor family. So they get this $500 million. So let's say 20% of that is profit, officially. That 20% profit goes to that family that got the contract. And the people who that family employ get jobs. Remember, they just get jobs. But at least the people that get jobs get an income so that their family can live. So if the company employs 30 people and the average family has 5 people, in theory, you would say that's 150 people that get jobs. The profit from that project, the 20% profit for that 500 million profit project goes just to that family. Doesn't go to the families they employ, goes just to that
Right.
family.
That's right.
And 80 to 90% of Guyanese who make that kind of profit, what do? They buy
Right.
foreign currency and they take it out the country, or they might buy a couple of properties in Ghana, but most of that money goes out of the country. So they then take this 20% profit and they buy foreign currency. The rest of the people who live between Rosignol and Abari don't see a cent, other than the little small shop owners where they go to buy food, rice, and so on. That money does nobody who lives between Abari and Rosignol in that project will see a single cent of that. Not the NDC, not any of the big shop owners. And when you come to the shop owners, most of those again are Chinese supermarkets. And what do they do with the profit that they make? It goes out the country. So you see on this trickle down theory, 99% of the people who are living between Abari and Rosignol are not seeing a single cent benefit. But what would they read when they open a newspaper is government gave $500 million to build a road between Rosignol and Abari, and this has gone into the economy. Nobody is getting any benefit from that. No rice farmer, no civil servant, nobody working in the NDC. And that trickle-down theory just does not bring to the average person. And that's only a very small example. If you go outside of that area, you go quarantine or you come to Georgetown, none of that money is going into the economy or is trickling into the pockets of anybody's life. Then we have to come to where the corruption is kicking. The $500 million that they're getting paid, let me say low, 15% of this bribe, right? So 10% of 500 million is 50 million, right? 15% is 75 million. So you pay somebody 75 million to get the contract. So all you have now, you ain't cutting down your 20% profit, you know. You have to make a minimum of 20% profit, and that's calculated on the $500 million, right? So the $500 million, 20%, you got to make sure you make your little 100 million, right? So you don't pay your bribe, 75 million. You got to make your 100 million. There's 175 million. So we're left back with $325 million to build a road that originally $500 million was supposed to build. So what's going to happen there? You're going to cut down on the stone, the aggregate, the tar, everything you're going to cut down on. You're going to cut enough corners. And then just to make sure that you get your money, you're going to spend more money again to bribe the engineer so he can pass the road, right? So if the road's supposed to be 10 inches thick, you're going to build it now at 6 inches. And you know what I mean? The 10 inches was calculated for all them heavy truck and thing for pass through. So when them heavy truck pass through for the 6 inch, the road gonna break up. Just like how the Heroes Highway already started to break up when they got to patch it. So the country now, which didn't get a single cent off of this $500 million they gave out, which they thought they were getting a proper 10-inch road, gonna end up spending more money to repair that road, right? They got to repair that road. So more money now. You got to go and look for another $250 million to fix that road in less than 2 years. Where you going to go? You're not going to go back to your old friend who gave it by before. So the same thing happens again. And then when you add in the amount of people that got for drive past the hole, get into accident because the road bad, then the society suffers more because people are now suffering because of the poor state of the road. And that shows how this trickle-down theory is the worst possible economic
Policy.
solution
Yeah.
and policy for our country. because everybody, as soon as they get this money, they're hustling to take it out of the country. So you don't have any real development there. The country gets hurt. The people in that community don't see the money. And so people, not only in Region 5 and 6, but throughout the country have to understand how you are not seeing getting any benefit from this and how the corruption is eating away. Just to close off, remember that contract they gave to build, I think it's the pump station to Pui, Critic Country company.
Region 3.
Right. It ain't built yet. So that's a loss, you know. And then the government doesn't go and sue the company that they already pay the money. So normally if you pay 10%, but a lot of these chaps getting 80 and 90% and perhaps most of the contract money up front. And the government then go to get it back. When it don't work, what it's going to do is hire another company. So in effect, you're spending the same money twice. And you're ending up with a lower quality project. So I just want people to understand how this works. What you end up with is the worst possible quality product. And the money goes to these people who benefit. And these people who benefit take the money, buy US and go out. If they go to buy Amazon and they buy fancy stuff, if they go up on holiday, whatever you think of they spend this money on, it works out to be foreign currency. And
But what
so
is worth?
go
What
ahead.
is worth? I want to mention. Sorry, I interrupt, but let me just,
No, go ahead.
as the thought is in my head, what the government in its corrupt practice has also started, in view of the fact now that they want the corruption to continue, is that they now take contractors and pay them over and above the engineers estimate by $600-700 million.
Yep.
So if the contract price is $500 million, like what you talk there, they're now offering certain specialized contractors. Why don't take this thing for the $500 million way, and the engineer estimate the value of it $1.1 billion, so that they could collect their $300 million now as corrupt.
600.
No, no,
Can I
no,
ch-
no. What I'm saying, right? Because
Go-
they jack up the thing so that the government might not only get 15% and $75 million, but the government or the officers involved who are taking the bribes are going to get more than that.
Actually, Beverly, we had an actual example of that
Yes.
in that recently opened Crane Road over on the west coast of
I.
Demerara.
Oh,
That's right.
The
Remember that?
engineer's estimate in one of the blocks, the engineer's estimate. Well, let me just say this from the start. 24 or 25 companies bid for that block, for that tract of road that they had to build. 25. And you know, the people that bid are international companies and some of the best local companies we have. Some of the best, saying that be the rest of them. They knock out all the other competitors except one company, right? So this one company alone, only their bid went through. And then they awarded the contract to that company at $600 million above the engineer's estimate. Now, how if the government engineer said that the cost to do this work is X, what justification is there for saying X plus $600 million? They had a volcano overnight that they got to build around the volcano, or they got to build a tunnel under the river all of a sudden. Just think about it. 600 million, $3 million US above the estimates, the engineer's estimate. So that Guyana the country, has paid $600 million into somebody's pocket for a project that is worth $600 million less than what the government paid. And what happens to that $600 million? You can't carry it to the bank in Guyana. They got to buy something, gold bars, or you can ship it out to the country in Guyana dollars. Do you
That's the
realize
corruption. That's the
do you
corruption.
realize the scale of the corruption? So when we come to the budget, the first thing we have to realize is don't worry with the big fancy numbers about how much $1 trillion. It is so much $1 trillion more for them to steal exactly like they stole that $600 million. All the increase in the size of the budget does It doesn't increase the amount of work or the quality of the work because they don't address that. All you're saying really is that there is more money to pay more $600 million above the government's estimate. And when you tell me, you bring examples of the corruption. Imagine the president at 5:30 call a whole set of people to abuse them about contracts that ain't finished on time. This is how the president work. But more importantly, what are those ministers doing? What are the permanent secretaries doing to check to see how the government money works? If you're going to build your house, you have a contract with a contractor that says this is what you're going to build, this is how much material you're going to use, this is the time frame. So you don't need the president to come and tell you when the contractor don't bill on time. You don't need the president to come and tell you when the contractor say he bringing green heart and you end up with hardwood. You don't need the government to come and tell you when you're supposed to have concrete blocks that makes 341 or whatever, and you end up with one that is 000. That's not the work of the president. But at the end of the day, what you end up with is a product. If you end up with a bad house, and then the walls crack, and the wood shrink, so when you paint it, you see in the cracks between the wood, you end up with a corkball house. And that is exactly what is happening to Guyana. Except that when you end up with a corkball house, you're cork duck literally because you ain't got money to go and build a new house. And you don't have money to repair it, but you got the mortgage to the bank. The bank ain't concerned that you get a bad house. The bank, you could go and cry as much to the bank to say, well, look, the floor in the kitchen cracked, the tiles cracked. The bank can give you more money because they assessed your loan based on where your salary is. And your salary increased. The government, on the other hand, when they end up with that bad house, they ain't got no problem with money. They're going to say, knock it down. Or don't worry with the house, let me build a new one. And they're going to go and build another house that is just as bad.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, Friday, in another few days, budget 2025 is going to be presented. And again, we're going to hear it is the biggest budget ever. What you're saying so far, paints a dismal picture of what is to come. The vice president recently said that the budget 2025 will focus on community needs. We see of recent, last year especially, a lot of $40 million and below contracts being given out, hundreds in communities, people walking in and getting contracts. How much of this we're likely to see happening this year?
I want to believe, Beverly, that we're going to see a lot of it, but it will come with the purpose of being directed to buy the votes. Largely, that is what it is going to be, and also to strengthen back the support bases of the PPP so that the elections could be going to be won. And that is in relation to how they're going to do this community service thing. Jagdeo is clever when it comes to these devices because I know him. He's a fella who likes to win. And he knows that there is not sometimes, when poor people are plentiful and all of that, whenever you do a handout now, they sometimes become obeisant to you. And that is what he does. He ensures an impoverished set of communities are around. And elections time, he bear on to them gifts and behaves like the Lord. The Lord has come. Look, this is what I would hope that the Guyanese do not fall prey to. But it is definitely going to be on the table because the sophistication in relation to how you buy the votes can hardly come in any clearer way or could hardly come in any more devious manner. He's going to literally go there and say, look, this is what we have targeted for you. You take this, take a tractor, take a this. You will go to some Amerindian communities. He's going to give them speedboats. He's going to do that. And he's going to say, as part of the projected budget that was passed, we have $50 million for this community. And here we are here to distribute it. And he and Ashni and Irfan Ali will go and they're going to distribute it because the money is there. We've collected about 4 billion US dollars for the oil in 2024. Okay? And so you have lots of money in that revenue stream that will go there. Again, infrastructure works. Well, I've already reiterated that to you. And so that will also be part and parcel of it. So their war chest is going to be big. The budgetary allocations are going to be large in relation to these community services. And that is what you're going to see in the budget to buy the vote to ensure that the PPP gets another 5-year term so that a lot of their projects are going to be brought to fruition within that other 5 year and so on. Because hardly anything is going to be completed as they have lied to the people, Edge Hill and Irfan Ali and all of them. Almost 70% of the public sector special works that are supposed to be done have not been done. It's only about 30%, although they put aside $666 billion last year. 70% of the work is still to be done. The gas, the shore project. I mean, the people fighting them right now in court for more money. Lindiska or whatever is the name of the firm and a couple of other big projects have stalled literally when they're projecting. They said we're going to get a bridge now at the end of the year. Now they put them March month. Now they put them to July month and all kind of thing. So they want to see that some of their projects come to fruition so that they can have, people will support them and so on. But I rather suspect that the Guyanese people are going to be smarter than that. And although times have been somewhat, difficult and so on, and they're going to say, well, at least they give you, we have to do our political work too to ensure that we bring this kind of mischief that the PPP will want to carry out on the people to smarten up the people and for them to go for a change come 2025.
Beverly, I
Gentlemen,
want
tell
to.
me.
Sorry. It just in response to your
Go
question.
ahead.
A larger budget. The first thing, and I think our people are smart enough. The reason why the budget is bigger is not because we produce more sugar, or we export more gold, or we exporting more rice. The only reason the budget is larger is because we are selling more oil. And that is not a result of anything the Guyanese have done. We are selling more oil because that resource is there, and we have projected that we are going to increase our oil production. So we're moving from, we had 600,000 barrels a day now, we're going to go up. So this is not as a result of our work. This is a result of a plan the oil companies have to increase. So the budget didn't get bigger because of our work.
That's right.
That's the first thing we have to understand. So every time they come and tell you it's a bigger and better budget, it's not a result of the government's work. It's nothing that we do. We're not exporting more sugar. As you know, sugar is probably down to about 20, 30,000 tons. We used to export up to 600,000 tons in the better day. So every other indicator or every other export, where we got to work to export more has dropped. So this ain't come from no magic by Ashley. This is just purely a result of the increased oil production. The other thing people have to be, I'm sure they recognize this. We started oil production in 2019, December, commercial oil production. The People's Progressive Party has been in office. This is the 4th year, 4.5 years. What single project have they delivered before this last budget? They had 4 years to deliver any sort of improvement in the lives of people, any sort of cash grant, any sort of improvement in health, any sort of improvement in education. They had 4 years, and when we go to what the data says, they have failed. We have 20% of our children going to school in extreme food poverty. 40% of our children going to school in food poverty. And that's not AFC figures or PNC figures. That's the World Bank and the World Health Organization figures. You understand? 20% of our children. Now, in the fourth and in the fifth and final year, after the Alliance for Change and other opposition parties have been pressuring them, saying, look, this oil wealth sharing, all of a sudden you're hearing projects that you have never heard before. And the question is, if you were really concerned about the people of this country, what were you doing for the last 4 years? Why are we at 20% extreme food poverty? Why are we in any region of this country, and I'm only going to Region 9 statistics, having a matriculation rate, which means an overall pass rate, of 5%? You've been in office for 4 years of oil money. And after 4 years of oil money, the best you could do in Region 9 is fail 95% of the students after 5 years. So literally, if you went into secondary school in September 2019, and you're coming out now, 2025 or 2024, you would have been one of the 95% that completely did not matriculate. And this is when Guyana has been the richest it has ever been in its history. And the only people who have been responsible for education during this period is the People's Progressive Party. But no, they're going to come back and tell you in their last year of office, we are increasing the educational budget. Hello, oh my guy. If after 4 years you fail me and I can't come out of high school after you, this country is in its riches, what are you going to do when the bucket been in, the rain can't fill it? And that is exactly what is happening in every single sector. Mathematics. 5 years we got oil money flowing through our ears, noses, and everywhere else. And 31% of the students that sat CXC passed maths. The Caribbean said it's the worst year for them. They were 34, but you know, Guyana, when we are the richest country in the entire Caribbean, we ended up with low mathematics passes than the entire Caribbean that got budgets that must be less than 50% our size. And you're going to tell us in the last year that because you throw more money behind it, somehow you're going to fix that problem. What happened to those hundreds, thousands of students that have gone through that educational system for the last 5 years when this country has been its richest? Jagane had that money. Borneme had that money. Haiti had that money. So when this country had the most money it has ever had, we have had the worst pass rates. Worse. We have never been at 31% in maths. So it is obvious that when you look at the performance of this government, it doesn't matter what they say to you now. They clearly cannot deliver. And the best asset the country has is its people. Now, how much road it got is its people. And you hope that people have become so qualified that wherever they go in this world, they have the qualifications to be able to get the best jobs. That means they have come from an educational system that has put them better than anybody else. And we are in the reverse trajectory. 31% of our people are passing mathematics. So people must understand that when these people come with the budget and tell you it's the biggest and the best, ask them how come at the wealthiest time, the most fortunate economic time in the history of this country, you have failed to address their most basic needs.
Nigel, it's like you were reading my mind because I was just about to ask you guys to address the fact that, as you rightly said, we were earning so much from oil, but yet still real poverty exists to such a large extent. Mothers still have to determine if the last $500 should she go to work, or should she send a child or her two children to school, or should she buy something to put in the pot. Those are decisions many women face on a daily basis. So what would be your proposals for lifting ordinary Guyanese out of poverty? Every time there is an increase in salary, prices automatically shoot up. So, what proposals would you guys make to alleviate poverty for the bottom tier of the earners income? How would we lift those people out of poverty?
Nigel, go
Great.
ahead.
All right. So Beverly, I'm glad you raised that, but unfortunately we don't have enough time. But I'm going to start. Lifting people out of poverty is not a one-shot solution. It is a long-term solution. There are things you can do immediately to alleviate some of the problems. Some, like for example, some of the cost of living. The bottom line with coming out of poverty is what all our grandparents and foreparents told us. It is education. You have to get qualified. The reason why you have to get qualified is that at least if you qualify and you got a certificate, you have a better chance of either getting a better job or you could go and start your own business. Now, a lot of people say you don't have to have a certificate to start your own business, and that is true. But at least the economy has to be able to give you the opportunity to start your own business, right? So you got to have a real economy, not an economy where you know a minister and get a contract. Because unless you know the minister, you can't get a contract. So
Definitely.
whether you're educated or you're not educated, you ain't getting that job. So we start off by saying, look, we have to make sure that our young people are getting an education so that, look, if you when you finish school, if you're not academically inclined, you go and you do some technical training or you start doing that technical training in school. So if you become a welder, right, and you grow up in Bordeaux or you grow up in Georgetown, you get your little certificate and you could go and you beg work from some oil company that's looking for qualified welders. Because in the oil industry, they could only employ you if you're qualified and certified. That's the nature of the business. And we know that for the next 15 years minimum, or at least 20 years, the economy is going to be driven by oil. So you got to start producing students who are qualified in the areas where the economy is going to create jobs. That's a longer term process because you're not going to see an overnight change because training takes time. We have a lot of people who are coming out of school or dropping out of school, they ain't finishing school. 1 in 2 students is 48%, not finishing secondary school. But we can't just left them so. Because if you leave these people without qualification to their own devices, it's only a matter of time before they're going to end up in criminal activity. And look at
Yep.
Trinidad. Just look at Trinidad. Trinidad had to declare a state of emergency because the state cannot handle crime. They didn't get there overnight. But when they reach there, it's not something you can come out of overnight. And so we have to make sure that we don't end up in the same positions. The drug gangs in Trinidad, the police can't control them. They didn't get there overnight. So what we have to do now is all those people that fell through the cracks at school, and this is not a black or Indian, people falling through the cracks all over the place. There's this misconception. There's only people of a certain ilk falling through the cracks. If you go into all them PPP support areas on the East Coast and the quarantine, look at the drug use. It's just that it is not in the city, so you don't see it. More and more of the young men are getting addicted to
That's so
narcotics.
true. That is very true.
That means that they ain't gonna have work. And when you get addicted to narcotics, apart from the criminal activity of consuming the narcotics, you're going to commit more crime to be able to pay for the narcotics.
Media habit.
Right. So what we have to do, and I said this yesterday, and it's very, I know people are going to say, how are you bringing it back? But this is on a voluntary basis. We have to have mass training across the country that will educate these people in a particular skill and instill the most important thing that anybody can have in business, and that's discipline. If you grow up without discipline, I'm sorry, it don't matter whether you're a lawyer or whether you're a street sweeper. If you don't wake up at 5:30 to get up to go to work, you're not going to make your money. That is a fact of life. And unfortunately, in our society, a lot of people who fall through the cracks or go through school and don't come out with any sort of qualification, that element of discipline is not necessarily there. So it's like a voluntary national service across the country. We have to set up these centers where these people who didn't make it in school, they might be very good at technical skills or potentially good at it, and we train them, whether it's 6 months, 8 months, and they get the discipline so that when they come onto the job market, they're coming onto the job market with qualifications. So they could either get a job in the oil industry or they could start their own business. And then starting your own business, the state has to be able to provide that kind of startup financing. So they have an opportunity to get the foot into the door for this country, which if it's managed properly, is going to be the most successful country. But that way you do it. Otherwise, what happens is this. And that's exactly what's happening now. You notice most of the contractor companies that fetch in sand from Suzdijk to Georgetown, most of the companies that win in the road contracts, the big ones, are all foreign companies, Trinidadian companies in particular. So it's not even as if you are growing the Guyana business class in construction. Other than little corruption, you're not even building the business class because those truck drivers and the people that own those trucks are not even Guyanese businessmen. We have a company called Ashoka building the road from the East Coast to the East Bank. They're importing truck drivers. Do you believe that? They are importing truck drivers. That is not a high level job. Imagine the amount of Guyanese that could be driving those trucks. So to get back to your question, we have to make sure that we train our population. That's the most basic responsibility any government has, is to make sure that the population is trained. And I know everybody likes to make this comparison to Singapore, but I gotta make it to Singapore and parts of India and parts of China. Let me go with Singapore. Singapore has no natural resources. They don't have no oil, they have no gold, they don't have any forests, they have no natural resources. However, they are the most vibrant, advanced economy in Asia. And China, the big powerhouse China, all its shipping, all its technical capacity it has, all these FPSOs that we have offshore, the hull is built in China, and the real technical part, which is the top side, is built and assembled in Singapore. Why? Not because Singapore got steel, but because of the capacity of their people, the technical skills, the computer knowledge, the ability to build the models, to put that top side, which is really the heart and soul of an FPSO, together. We have to get our people to that level. We don't need to find a lot of big industrial low-level jobs. We're less than 1 million people. So Brazil, which has been begging for decades to get a port to export their goods, if Guyana does exactly what Singapore does for that, Brazil can produce billions of stuff that it can export through Guyana. But to come back to your question, so we have to develop these education training centers. We have to build a business class, not a merchant class. And let me just explain the difference between merchant and business. Merchant class and merchants are people who buy goods overseas cheap, come in Guyana and sell them expensive, make a big profit, and you say he's a businessman. That don't do nothing for the country. All you doing this, like if you go to Amazon and buy it, except that they're buying it for you and bringing it in and making a markup, and they say, look, you make X billion dollars this year. A true entrepreneurial class creates the ideas, like the Elon Musks of this world, like the Bill Gates of this world. And the only way you're going to be able to develop that kind of knowledge economy, especially with AI being as important as it is that your children have to be trained to that level in a modern economy. So we got to be produce people who doing the computer skills, people who doing designing programs, people who are writing scripts for computer programs. And that's not difficult because our school population is only, what, 15, 16,000 students coming into the job market every year. India has a school, I forget the name, I think it's something information technology, that is better than the best institute, that is better than the best in technology in the United States, is better than MIT. There are students who rather go there than go to MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So India realized that you have to develop the technical skills, and it is, at the end of the day, the smartest people are the best citizens to have. That's what we have to concentrate on. So we have to change our educational system from the beginning. Kids between 3 to 7, the most vital years of their life, have to have a better form of tuition. To build their creative thinking and approach. And we have those examples: China, India, Singapore. So the teachers who teach those students have to be trained differently. So we shouldn't be pouring billions of dollars into infrastructure. We should be pouring billions of dollars into our human infrastructure and training our teachers, training the people who have to teach the students who are going to become the creative entrepreneurs in the best possible way. You see, but it is not sexy. You can't drive down the road and say, look, we have 500 teachers with first class honors out of the best institutions in the world. You can't do that. But you can drive down the road and say, look, um, you got a new road here, boss. You used to have red road. Now you got a new road. And ask people to vote. But people must realize what an insult to their intelligence it is
That's right.
to do that. I prefer to go through Fort Morant, Rusignol, Hope Tongue, all those areas, and find 100 highly qualified teachers training the next generation. Then tell me you give some fancy highway, and I must be grateful. And Kemraj touched on it. If you have a government who depends on the fact that you're stupid, and therefore you can't ask questions. They want to keep you ignorant. They want to tell you we're giving you the biggest budget when the biggest budget ain't coming from nothing they do. The biggest budget coming from the fact that Exxon opening another oil field. Nothing to do with you. And all of a sudden you run around saying thank you. Imagine the indigenous community, as Kemrad says, where they're going to give them tractor and trailer. Imagine after 4 to 5 years, 4 years in office, the primary and secondary school students in Philippi were using pit latrines. This is after 4 years of commercial oil production. And you're going to go and tell them people take a tractor this year and vote for me? And the only reason they got the change in the pit latrines is because some political party going to expose you and then they say they got latrine policy? How you could be the richest country, fastest growing, after 4 years at $65 million an hour, and you got citizens in pit latrines at not even probably at nursery school? How does that happen? And still, in that same community, the pass rates are awful. They don't have internet in the school. Basic, basic vehicles for bringing knowledge to people. But like I said, I can go on to explain this for hours because people need to understand the context in which this happens.
Yeah, Beverly, I know our time is running out, but I want to make it quite clear that we had put up an experiment through my ministry under the community strengthening, it was called the Citizen Security Strengthening Program, whereby we pluck out the vulnerable people, kids 18 to 23 or thereabouts, and even younger. Once the community leaders saw that these fellas are vulnerable, they could get to do wicked things a little in the future. They saw their lives, their family lives and so on, mother getting beat up and this and we took a portion of a $5 million US to ensure that the mechanics next around that neighborhood, or the spray painter around that neighborhood, or the refrigerator fella around that neighborhood, to accommodate 5 of these fellas. And the thing worked magnificently. We paid them $70 US a month to at least catch a taxi to go to that schooling. And it's a 6 months to 9 month program. And it made so many technicians out of, there were 3 communities in quarantine, lots more in Region 4, and we had a couple in West Dem. And it worked. A lot of the women became, them girls who just look after their fingernail and doll you up and so on. And they are fully employed now. And they're employing other people. That's what we got to do to help these poor people, as you asked the question. And it also helps the crime rate, because potentially in 3-4 years, an 18-year-old, when he ain't get no job no way, he ain't get no training no way, where you can go? You can go a thief, because he can go for live. And so it curbed, or at least it reduced, that potential reality. So it is important that there are lots of policies that we have tried and have worked successfully, because I had to do a report to the Citizen Security people at the IDB, and it was beautifully done. And we said with the oil monies that we get, we are going to continue that program and expand it. With all the oil money now, neither the Ministry of Education or Social Service nor Security Ministry have re-engaged that project. And over 3,300 people got training like that from especially vulnerable areas where the parents are poor, they came out from bad family situations and so on. And it helped. So we could do a lot of things to help.
Beverly, I know we got to wrap up. I just want to give you an
Yes, please.
example of finding real solutions to problems. We consider that we add 2 or 3 series of cars, which is 10,000 cars, every year to the road, right? We haven't studied if we put light rail from Diamond to Georgetown. You ain't got to add 10,000, 20 and 30,000 cars to the road on the existing road network. Georgetown can't get any bigger. You can't put any more roads in Georgetown, you know. But everybody is coming in. Now it's back to almost where it is. Is a hiccup in the East Bank, and in the East Coast is exactly the same thing. Imagine if we put light rail from Annandale to Georgetown. You don't have to get in your car, 2 of you, you and 2 children, and drive to Georgetown. You could get on that rail and you're in Georgetown. You rationalize the transportation system in Georgetown somewhere central, and then you have high level. This monorail is not cheap. You're gonna not any kind of low class, low quality. You put it, it's air conditioned. People come. If it's eco friendly, you could probably run part of it on solar, and you now have the means of moving large people in and out the city. The people going home at 11 o'clock in the night don't have to fight up at Stabrook, get robbed and all kind of story to go home. You have light rail. And we have to start thinking creatively. Georgetown is an absolute mess. We don't have any town planning. Look at what's going on with the garbage. How can you possibly, for political reasons, allow the situation to reach where you decide you ain't funding the city council because the people in the city don't vote for you, and allow that health risk? Do you realize that all you need is the outbreak of anything looking like a serious disease, and we in real trouble? And the thing about disease, it ain't racist. It don't pick one race alone, buddy. Because you know what? At the end of the day, all of we, like they say in the song, the way how we party is not how we vote. But it's when you're partying is when the diseases get here. And so we're not even addressing the issues that we should be confronting as a rapidly developing country. They are so secondary because we have reached such a rudimentary level that they're telling me vote for me and not them because they look different, and there's no discussion about policy. But enough for me and my griping tonight. I think we're well past our time.
We
Yeah.
have gone way past our time. Gentlemen, I think we can continue for another hour if we had the time. Such an interesting discussion. And so I want to thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Kemraj. I hope we can do this again really soon because there's so much more to be said. Especially after Friday when the budget is presented, I hope I can have you guys back and we continue this discussion. And a very special thank you to Team DTV for accommodating us. So, guys and our viewers, good night and thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Bye bye.